My name is Danny McCain. I graduated from this institution in 1974. I came back last year and did a one-year sabbatical here. So we congratulate CIU and President Smith for this wonderful 100th year celebration. And we trust that all of you are having a good time, learning a lot about missions as a result of this workshop. My responsibility is to talk to you about reaching the African university. This is something that I have personally been doing for the last 34 years, so I look forward to sharing a few thoughts with you. To help you understand that, I want to first of all give you a little background of how I wound up in Africa. I was pastoring a church in Georgia with a PhD. And you don't really need a PhD to pastor a church. That's not what PhDs are designed for. And so somewhere after a number of years, I started looking around for a place that I could serve in an English-speaking country. I tried Jamaica, I tried Kenya. I didn't even get responses from the mission agencies. In 1985, a missionary from Nigeria named Gary Maxey came to see me in Springfield, Georgia, which is straight south of here. And he tried to get me to work in a Bible college that he was working with. I was not particularly interested in that, but he made an interesting comment. He said one time he was having immigration problems, and so he went to the local university to try to get a job in the religious studies department, because he knew if he could get a job in the religious studies department, that would solve his immigration problems. So that planted a seed in my mind. I'd never thought about teaching in a public university. And so I began thinking about that. A few months later, he called me and told me that a man from Nigeria was coming to Florida and that he might be able to help me get in a job in a public university. So I drove down to Florida and met with him at a guest house. And he had come to attend the Full Gospel Businessmen's Conference. And he was a really powerful Pentecostal. So after 10 minutes, he said, I'd gone to a lot of trouble to meet him. He said, what can I do for you? I said, well, I'd like to teach in a university religious studies department in an English-speaking country. And he said, well, that's great. He said, we'd love to have you teach in my university. Unfortunately, we don't have a department of religious studies. But being a strong Pentecostal, he said, no problem, we'll just start one. So that sentence planted a seed in my mind. Most religious studies departments in public universities are pretty worthless. And so it kind of planted a seed in my mind. Would it be possible to go somewhere and actually start a department of religious studies? If you could do that, you could influence the curriculum, the library, the staff, etc. So I started talking about this with everyone who would listen. A few months later, I spent about 2 hours talking to another friend about this, and I came home and picked up, I was teaching a course in a world religions course, and I picked up my textbook to prepare for the next class, and the next chapter was on Judaism, and the first sentence in that chapter said, at a time when a good deal of discussion is engendered by the Jewish state in the Middle East, and when departments of Jewish studies are an established part of many universities in Europe and America, it's time for a fresh study of Judaism. The phrase that got my attention was departments of Jewish studies. I wrote in the margin of my Bible, who started them, who funded them? And the answer is very obvious. Jewish organizations, in order to promote their own interests, including religious interests, have created departments, chairs, centers of Islamic studies. And we later discovered that Muslims have used this strategy far more in creating, even up here at Duke University, there's a Center of Islamic Studies, funded by not taxpayer dollars, but funded by money from Saudi Arabia and other places. So a few months later, a short time later, I invited a number of friends together in Kansas City, and we constituted ourselves into the International Institute for Christian Studies. Our objective was to promote and develop academic Christian study projects in public universities. We have a lot of good organizations doing campus ministry, but we couldn't find an organization that was focusing on the academic part of the university, so we started one. And I traveled to Nigeria a few months later. I met the Vice Chancellor of the River State University of Science and Technology. I told him I represented the International Institute for Christian Studies, and he said he'd never heard of our organization. Only about 50 people in the whole world had heard of us by that time. But I told him we were looking for a place to do a pilot project, and he was open to it and invited me to come back a few days to meet with the deans and directors, and I did. Long story short, we were able to get a contract with this university to create a Christian studies unit that was part of the Institute of Foundational Studies, and we turned it into a 2-year part-time evening training program for pastors. And that's what I moved my family in 1988 to Nigeria to start that program. And I had to soon make a decision whether I would remain back in Nigeria and do that kind of work or come back to the U.S. and become an administrator. It took me 8 seconds to make that decision, so we decided to stay in Nigeria, and other people could help us do it. As I mentioned, our original focus was for people like me, Bible theology people, trying to place them in public universities, and we were successful. However, our organization has grown in 2 different ways since that time. We started sending people to the former Soviet Union, and there were many people, universities requesting English teachers and law professors and medical people and engineers. So around 1994 or 5, we broadened our organization to recruit and place Christian academics in all academic disciplines. And so that is what we have done over the years. I don't have the exact statistics because I don't work here, but the last time I heard, we had placed something like 360 academics in 114 public universities in 52 countries and 22 broadly defined academic disciplines. And so that's what we've been doing. The second way we expanded, although our ministry is quite unique, we followed a fairly traditional missionary organization strategy in that we recruited people in North America and sent them to other places. So for years, we've tried to figure out how we could do otherwise. And so it's a long story short, but starting about 10 years ago, culminating a couple of years ago, we have created a subsidiary organization called the Society of Christian Scholars. It is online. It's described in the brochure there. We provide 14 services for Christian academics in public universities. And we have something in the neighborhood of 776 academics from 80 nations representing quite a few students. So this is an organization, if you know Christians who are teaching in public universities, we are trying to provide, to identify, to recruit, to orient, to equip Christians in public universities. For example, my university is a public university. We have about 700 academics, about 650 of them are Christians. And so these are the people we're trying to reach, to help teach them and share with them and motivate them to do some of the things that we have done in the public universities over the years. So that's just a little bit of background of who we are, where we came from, what we are doing. And if you're interested in teaching at a public university sometime, our organization is a good place to start. I moved my family to Nigeria in 1988, and so what I want to do now is share with you some lessons we have learned about teaching in public universities overseas. We don't really do this in this country. Number one, we have discovered that teaching in public university is possible. When I first thought of this idea, I didn't know whether that would be possible or useful. But we have discovered that many universities in the international community, especially in the developing world, they want contacts with the Western world. And so we are able to take advantage of that. Shortly after I arrived in Jos, which was 31, we lived 3 years in Port Harcourt in southern Nigeria, and we've lived in Jos in central Nigeria. We've been there since 91. And shortly after I got there, I met this man in my Department of Religious Studies from Pakistan. I got to know him. We were both foreigners, and we had some things in common. I discovered his salary was paid by the Saudi Arabian embassy. And when I got to know him a little bit later, I found out that there were 70 academics in public universities in Nigeria whose salary and benefits and travel expenses were paid by the Saudi Arabian embassy. So even in predominantly Christian areas, when you get a free staff, people are interested in that. Global Scholars has been able to place academic missionaries in these places in Africa. We've placed 9 academics at the University of Jos and River State University, representing a total of 71 academic years. We placed 8 academics in 4 colleges of education in Nigeria, serving a total of 28 academic years. We have placed 7 academics in public universities in Uganda, South Africa, Rwanda, Morocco, the Gambia, representing 45 academic years. And I forgot Cameroon, that represents another 10 years. So we've been able to place, I think it's probably easier in Africa than many other places, but we've placed people in many places. So the point is, it's possible to get a job in a public university overseas, particularly in Africa. Number 2, universities in developing countries have greater flexibility than established Western universities. They are newer universities and they have less established traditions. Therefore, they're open to ideas. Though you need to have credibility, you don't just walk in there the first 6 months you're there and start making suggestions, but they are very open to ideas, and it makes it possible to go and have influence in these universities. For example, about 10 years ago, we sent a team to the Gambia. The Gambia is right on the western tip of Africa. It's totally surrounded by Senegal. Senegal is French-speaking, but the Gambia is English-speaking. It's a 80% plus Muslim country. All the upper level government officials and university officials are Muslims. So we pointed out to them, you have a Department of Islamic Studies in this university. Why don't you have a Department of Christian Studies? And they said, well, we don't have any staff, blah, blah, blah. And so we said, if we can help get you staff and support this program, will you be willing to start a Department of Christian Studies? And 2 years ago, we graduated our first set of students, Christian Studies, from the Department of Christian Studies at the University of the Gambia. They like this kind of thing. It's not always possible, but we were able to do it there. So, we Christians have been good at creating Christian ministries on campus. We heard this powerful presentation last night from a representative of Cru. They've been doing this for many years. But we haven't thought so much about invading and participating in the academic, the real part of the university. So we work in the university from the inside out. Number 2, Teaching in public universities is strategic. That means it's important. That means there are lots of benefits. When I first got to Port Harcourt and we created this Christian Studies program, which was basically a pastoral training program, which we started there, and then I reproduced the same program at the University of Jos later. We discovered that, one, you have instant credibility. This is a university. This isn't, it's not a Bible college or a seminary. We have theological neutrality. We're not Baptist, Presbyterian, Assemblies of God, or Anglican. We're not any danger of stealing anybody's pastors. Academics in public universities avoid visa problems. I work for the Federal Republic of Nigeria. My visa issues are handled in the diplomatic section of Nigeria. And so I'm not a missionary in Nigeria, I'm a civil servant, and that has some advantage. Academics in public universities have a cost-effective approach to ministry. We have trained hundreds of pastors, elders, deacons, Bible translators. Some have gone on to become bishops. We never bought a piece of land, built a building, hired a librarian. We have been able to use the resources that are found in the public universities. Academics in public universities serve in the most important institution in the world for social change. I think you would, apart from the family, I don't think there is any other institution that's had more impact in changing the world than the university. And so you have a seat at the table when you are an academic in that situation. Academics in public universities influence the profile and programs of the universities. We've donated thousands of books to various universities of the world, which influence the students who read them. I've helped to create 2 academic programs, and one of them is the one I've told you about. Another one was a program for training HIV/AIDS workers, official programs. I've been able to help get people employed. My own PhD students, I've gotten them employed, and they will continue in that university long after I've been gone. We've helped create campus-wide ministry of Christian academics. We meet once a month for prayer, for strategizing. How can we really win this university for Christ? We've written textbooks that are used in universities, colleges of education, seminaries. Some of them are, I just brought a few samples of some of those. You can look at them later. But many of my textbooks are used in universities, colleges of education all over Nigeria. I believe that the University of Jos is better off today because of the influence of the staff from global scholars who have served there for those 71 years. Teaching in a public university is strategic because of the platform that it gives you. Now, let me be very clear. We do not consider ourselves to be tent makers. We do not go to the university to get a job so we can do our real ministry, which is church planting or something else. Our ministry is the university. That's where we focus our time and attention. That's where God has called us. But it still provides you an incredible platform to do other ministries. Over the last 30 years, I've probably preached an average of 50 times a year in various churches and conferences. I've also taught adjunct classes for several different seminaries, Bible colleges, and mission schools. I've written over 30 books and manuals that helps the body of Christ in Nigeria. One of our global scholar academics, his name is Tom Johnson. He went to Europe. He was at Belarus at first, and then he went to Prague and has lived in Prague most of those years. He's become one of the leading theologians in Europe. He has worked very closely with the World Evangelical Alliance. During this week, the same time our conference is going on, he is speaking at a major conference in Bali, the G20 Religion Forum. He is representing the World Evangelical Alliance, and it's mostly a Muslim thing, but he is representing Protestant Christianity in that particular opportunity. And he has gained that credibility and that platform by teaching at Charles University, one of the oldest universities in the world, and other things. Christian academics serve the community. I've helped to create an organization that provides mobility to polio survivors. We have lots of polio in Nigeria. Thousands and thousands of children who crawl on the floor. We think we have finally beat it, but we have a factory. We make these wheelchairs. We have about 50 employees. We crank out about 250 of these a month. We've given out 25,000 of these wheelchairs to handicapped people. At least 40% of them are given to Muslims. And it is a great way to present Christ to the community. I've helped to create 2 peacemaking organizations. We have lots of violence in Nigeria. And so we've been involved in lots and lots of peacemaking efforts. On 2 occasions, I have provided my home became a place for internally displaced people because of crises. We use those big missionary pots to cook and feed people. And we kept them in our house. The only night I counted, we had 69 people sleeping on our floor. So that happened on a couple of different occasions, serving the community. CIU never taught me anything about how I could, Michelle wasn't here then, but if maybe now you do, but it didn't teach me anything about running an IDP camp. We had to make up the rules as we went along, and it's been a joy to be able to serve the community. Christian academics serve the government. It is amazing how many, in fact, 95% of the work I do with government. I teach at a public university. I teach, we have created an organization to help teachers do in-service teaching for teachers at public schools, and we've done dozens and dozens and dozens of those workshops. We have religious education in public schools in Nigeria, and we have used that opportunity to do training workshops for those people. In 1999, we prayed that HIV would not come to West Africa. Unfortunately, it did. So by that time, we had about 6 years of experience working with the Ministry of Education and developing materials and doing in-service training. So we went to them and we wrote 5 additional themes for the religious studies curriculum, both Islamic studies and Christian studies. We developed a 5-day workshop. We developed a 90-page manual. And we have done that workshop in 14 of Nigeria's states. We have worked closely with the National Teachers Institute to develop, in fact, they came to us and asked us, would we develop a training program for their teachers? They are the only body in Nigeria that does in-service training for public school teachers. And so they asked us to develop. We developed it, and then we had to compete with other people to get the contract to teach that material. But we have received over $1 million from the Nigerian government to teach a faith-based AIDS awareness program that stresses abstinence. And so when you are part of a public university, it gives you this amazing platform to do this kind of ministry. Placing people in public universities in Africa is strategic for many reasons. The majority of the African universities use English as an official language. All the Anglophone countries. People often ask me, did you learn the language? How did you learn the language in Africa? And I tell them, I learned it as a child. So they say, wow, you did? And then I have to confess, the official language in Nigeria is English. The Anglophone parts of Africa have been less influenced by secularism. And therefore, you don't have to hide your faith. I don't hide anything about who I am. We are very public. And that would be true in, I think, practically every Anglophone country. The French-speaking have absorbed some of French's secularism. But most African countries are developing countries. and look to the West for many things, including scholars for their university. So this is a vacuum that Christians and Christian organizations must fill. Because African countries are in the process of change, they're open to changes related to God's kingdom. I've just discovered that. Because most African countries are developing countries, it is more possible to be involved in nation building and social and moral change than in countries that are more advanced. I have found that there are wonderful opportunities to help teach morality and develop materials for schools and societies that teach God's principles of morality. Excuse me, I have problems with my throat. And the doctor told me 35 years ago, if I ever talk longer than 20 minutes, I should lubricate my vocal cords. So, number 3, teaching in public university is good. It's good for your personal development. God has designed us in such a way that we're constantly growing and developing. I don't know of any profession in the world that helps you grow and develop more than teaching in a university. You have to keep learning and keep growing. You interact with key people in the society. The thought leaders are on the campuses of public universities today. So it helps to create a different perspective in life. You're exposed to art and music and drama. Africans are absolutely incredible in drama. And we just 2 or 3 times a year get to enjoy these incredible dramas. Being part of a public university helps you develop a holistic view of life. You learn to appreciate all aspects of these things. Number 2, it's good for your career. If you're interested in an interesting career. Academics do 3 things that help a person develop a well-rounded and holistic view. Number 1, academics teach. I have personally taught 26 different courses at the University of Jos, and I've taught some general religion courses, I've taught some general Christian courses, but I've been mainly able to focus on my own specialty, which is New Testament, and I've taught lots of students those things. Academics do research. Research is not it's not focused on quite as much in our Christian colleges and universities. It is public university. You publish or perish. You do research, you publish, you write, or you don't advance. For the past 8 years, I've been leading a research project related to the study of ancient manuscripts. We have some of the best material in all of Africa. Ancient manuscripts, ancient Torahs. We've had pieces of papyrus that are 278 years before Christ in our public university. So that's been a fantastic thing. I've been involved in Pentecostal research. I got a $500,000 grant from the Templeton Foundation to do Pentecostal research. I've led lots of 2 big projects on leprosy. One for Christians, we got a grant from Amsterdam, and to do research among Christians about the perception of leprosy. And I went back to them and said, why don't you let us do it with Muslims too? So I supervised our Muslim colleagues in doing similar research. My favorite proverb is 25 verse 2. It says, "It is the glory of God to conceal a matter. It is the glory of kings to search out a thing." Do you realize you can do something that God can't do? Yeah, we can sin. You can do something good that God cannot do. You can learn. You can search out things. And this proverb says, even if you are a king, you've reached the top of society, there's nothing more glorious you can do than research. And it's been I've been involved in a big old research project right now. We're studying, last Sunday was our last Sunday to do this, a 5-week project. We're studying the use of language in the churches in Nigeria.
30 years ago, everybody went to a house of church, read the house of Bible, sang from the house of hymnal. That's very rare these days. And so everything is shifting, and we're trying to understand that process. We've had 5 senior researchers, 27 research assistants. We have visited 81 churches, and we have over 2,000 questionnaires, which we're entering into the computer right now. Thirdly, academics do administration. If you can't just be an academic and teach or do a little research, you have to do administration. For years, I was the coordinator of this diploma in Christian studies. I've been the chairman of several Senate committees. One of the most interesting was that we went through a period, we kept getting these letters from former students saying they had cheated on an exam, or they cheated on a paper, or they cheated with their qualifications to get into university, begging forgiveness. So we didn't know what to do. So they appointed a committee, the Committee on Restitution, Confession, and Forgiveness, and I became the chairman. What do we do with these students who are confessing their sins 10 years later? Of course, as a full professor, I'm a member of the Senate and do all those things. About 2.5 years ago, the Vice Chancellor called me out of class one day, and he says, "McCain, what do you know about the Center for Conflict Management and Peace Studies?" I said, "I don't know much about it." Presented a paper over there. He said, "Well, I want to appoint you to that position." And I tried to beg out of it, but for the last 2.5 years, I've been a director of this center. We have 600 students, 23 academics. We do teaching. We have a postgraduate diploma, master of science, PhD program. We do research, and we do interventions. And so that's my current job. All of these things help to make you a more well-rounded person. I enjoy the life that God has given me. Serving in a public university overseas is good for your family. When I was a college student, I was impressed by a man who resigned being president of a Bible college and went to Korea as a missionary. And when he came back, I was jealous of his children because they had had such a rich life. And I wanted that for my children. I wanted my children to be able to have a rich background like that. And so I'd love to tell you that I had this great passion for the lost in Africa, and that's what drove me there. Actually, the first thing that started me thinking about going overseas was I wanted to have my children, I wanted to get them away from the materialism of America and see life like it really was. I don't think it has hurt my children. My wife has been with me all these 34 years. We've traveled all over. We've experienced many things. She's been involved in Bible study fellowship. She's worked with children in our community. She's primarily done accounting. We have lots of projects, and she's done that kind of stuff. I have 3 children. And I think they have benefited. My oldest daughter is Carmen. She teaches at the School of Oral and African Studies at the University of London. She is a PhD in African literature and languages. SOAS is the most prestigious place to study African things in the world. That's where my daughter teaches. My son Daniel has a video business. He lives in Lagos, Nigeria. He works all over Africa. He was in Ghana last week, South Africa, Kenya, all over. He has won Emmys. I don't even know what those things are, and many different awards. My youngest daughter is a physician and a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy. She's traveled all over the world with the Navy. She's flown off aircraft carriers on F-18s. She's jumped out of perfectly good airplanes with Navy SEALs. And I think my children have done reasonably well. Serving overseas is good. It's good for your family. The final point that I would make is teaching in a public university is required. It's required to obey the Great Commission. Jesus said, "Go and make disciples of all nations." All universities are in some kind of nation. They're located in certain ethnic areas. It's required to be salt and light in the world. Jesus told his disciples, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. These figures of speech suggest that we may be in every part of society if we build God's kingdom. We must be in every part of God's society if we're to build his kingdom there. The Mark 16 passage says, go into all the world and preach the gospel. The university is part of the world. If we're going to obey the Great Commission, we need to be part of the public universities. Again, I grew up thinking they're all wicked, evil places, and there's a lot of wickedness and evil in those public universities, but that's why God calls us to be there and in those places. It is required to make Christ Lord of every part of the world. Paul says that someday every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus is Lord to the glory of God the Father. How is that going to happen? God is not going to send angels to do it. He's going to use you and me. And if every knee, that includes all those knees in the public university, God is calling us to those places. There are two men who've been greatly influenced by public universities. The first one is John Wesley. You probably don't know how much you've been influenced by John Wesley. Many people view him as the founder of what we might call evangelicalism. He certainly was greatly influential in laying the foundation for the great missions movement of the 19th century. He got his start at a public university, and he spent years, and he had great respect for the public university. But there was a second man who was greatly influenced by public university. He went to the university as sort of a casual believer, a nominal person. However, when he got to the university, he was fascinated by one of his lecturers who just set him on fire. I think you know him. He has also influenced all of us. His name is Osama bin Laden. He went to a public university as a nominal rich kid. He left that university willing to give his life for Islam. He was influenced. How would our world be different if he would have had a Christian professor that influenced him in this way? Lecturing in a public university is not for everyone. It takes many years of tedious preparation to be qualified. In addition, though I have not stressed these things, it's not easy living in a foreign country. I've had a bicycle accident that knocked my teeth out after giving an exam one night. I've had malaria 24 times. Our family has suffered armed robberies. I've been shot at. I've been kicked in the face. We've gone through violent conflicts on 5 different occasions in which thousands of people have been killed within 10 miles of my house. So it's not easy. However, all things being equal, I cannot think of a more exciting, more fulfilling, more potentially influential ministry in building up God's kingdom than serving God in a public university. I challenge you, you young people, even you older people, give some thought to giving your life to serving in a public university. God bless you.